Good afternoon. This is Dawn Blake, and we are interviewing Homer Mundy for the Korean War Veterans Digital Memorial. First of all, Homer, can you give us your full name, please?
Homer William Mundy.
All right. And when and where were you born, Homer?
I was born in Strang, Oklahoma, a little town in the northeast of Oklahoma. And at one time, it was one of the largest cities in the county. And by the time I left there, it was down to about 250 people.
And what year and date were you born?
I was born December the 27th, 1930.
Okay. And current city and state, where do you currently live, Homer? Where do you currently live? What city is it that you currently live in?
1101 Harvest Glen, Plano, Texas.
In Plano, Texas. All right. And who were your parents, Homer, and what were their occupations?
Okay, my father's name was John Henry Mundy. Mm-hmm. He was a farmer, but he lost one of the small farms, lost everything during the Great Depression in 28, 29. And by the time I was born, he was moved into the edge of town. We weren't urban or suburb. It was just the edge of town, a poor section of town. And he had lost his farm and his team and everything during the Depression.
And this was actually in Strang, Oklahoma?
Strang, Oklahoma.
Okay.
My mother's name was Flo Audrey Mundy Coleman, and she was just a housewife. She was always stayed at home had a large family.
We had a large family. Speaking of large family, how many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had 5 sisters and 2 brothers.
Okay.
8 children.
8 children total. Okay.
I was the 5th of the bunch.
And you were 5th of the bunch, right smack dab in the middle almost, right? So, did you have any siblings that served in the military?
No.
No one else did. Okay. We can go ahead and move on to some of the military aspects. What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was in school. I had left home when I was 12 years old and was working on a farm. And that's so I could eat a little bit and go to school.
Okay.
And when I was reaching the age of 18, or before we reached the age of 17 really, the Army recruiter come through and talked to the school, and everybody that was reaching the age 18 was going to be getting their draft notice. And a buddy and I decided we'd just beat the draft and join the Army.
Okay. So you enlisted, is that correct?
I enlisted
Okay.
September 1948.
December, okay, 1940. You said December 7th, 1948? You said December 7th?
No, the 27th of September.
Okay, 27th of September. Okay, I apologize. And were you in any other wars besides the Korean War, Homer?
I was in Vietnam.
You were in Vietnam. How long were you in Vietnam?
I served 1 year in Vietnam.
Okay. All right. And did you receive any specialized training? If so, what kind of training was it?
Well, when I joined the Army, they didn't have any specialized training until after everybody took basic training. Everybody that entered the service took the infantry basic training. Mm-hmm. And from there, they split the group up into the different branches they were going to serve in. And I stayed in the infantry, but I didn't go to any advanced infantry school. I had requested and went to the quartermaster corps as a mechanic in a transportation. And I had went to the Army basic course for auto mechanics.
Okay. And is that what you had originally gone in there for, or was it?
That was my original request.
That's what you wanted to do. Okay. And whatever interested you in wanting to do auto mechanics before, with parents having lived on the farm and you going in with the specialization of wanting to be auto mechanic, was there something outside of the,
as a kid, bicycles was a rarity. Every kid didn't have a bicycle.
Right.
But I worked on bicycles for the kids that did.
Repairing everybody else's.
Then along came the initiation of the power lawnmowers, and I started working on lawnmowers. So I love mechanic work.
What about your dad's tractor? Did he teach you how to use the tractor?
No,
or
Dad didn't have a tractor. He lost his team in the Depression. But he done a lot of work on equipment, not necessarily on the power equipment, but on rakes and things like that.
reapers?
He worked, just
Mechanized reapers. Okay. And when you were in basic training, where were you located, and what was the name of the camp?
I was located at Fort Ord, California. Took basic at Fort Ord, California.
Okay.
And it's located right near Monterey,
Okay.
California.
And what was basic camp training like? You have any experiences there?
Rough, like all infantry basic at that time.
Yeah.
They would treat you fairly, but eat you up and make you understand that what they were trying to say was for your benefit, and it was. It turned out. I guess I grew up in the latter part of basic training. I realized real quick that what they were doing was for my own good.
Okay. You found that those experiences that were, that you were getting from basic training.
I never had any trouble with authority.
Right.
For them to tell me what to do and so forth didn't bother me.
Right.
Now, some of the methods they wanted me to use, kind of bothered me.
So, and did you find that while you were in basic, you were talking about your experiences as a child growing up and so forth? Do you feel that it mentally prepared you for what you were going to experience? Now that you can look back at it and your experiences during basic, do you think that the basic camp training actually prepared you? You think, fully prepared, or did you not? Do you feel until you got to war that that you needed to be where you were at, on the battlefield, and that was the training that you needed? I mean, you find that basic training and, in the battlefield, did you find that was really helping you, prepare you for it?
I had absolutely no idea what the military was going to be like. I didn't know what to expect. And like most teenagers, 17, 18 years old, I could foresee that there was not going to be any work around where I would live, because it was all a farm community, agriculture, and at one time it was a thriving community making ties and so forth for the railroad. But it had dwindled down to the point that there was no work there. Plus the opportunity to maybe see some of the other country or other parts of the country intrigued me. I looked forward to that.
So getting out and seeing the rest of the world and someplace else other than
They taught me how to communicate, really, to get out into the world and to meet other people, and to when you go through basic training, you meet people from all parts of the country. And if you just listen, you can learn a whole lot from different ones.
Absolutely.
And I think I grew up there. I learned something from the Army. They taught me discipline. They taught me respect, self-respect, mutual respect, respect for the elders, respect for law enforcement, and they showed me where there was a purpose for that. They taught you that when somebody told you to do something, normally they had something in mind for you, a larger picture. You were just fitting in.
Sure.
So it wasn't hard for me to grasp that.
Excellent. Okay. Give us your, it says auto mechanics and artillery basic through senior sergeant school. Okay. So when it says here, what branch did you serve in? what actual branch did you served in the Army? Is that correct?
Yeah, I served in the Army. When I went in, there really wasn't much openings for any service.
Okay.
Respectfully, the Air Force right after World War II, and the Air Force, or the Army Air Corps, and the Navy and Marines, they were letting people out instead of taking people in. Mm-hmm. And the Army, having lost so many people during World War II, was trying to rebuild.
Okay.
And so I was fortunate enough to even get in the Army.
Okay. And it mentions here about auto mechanics, then artillery basics through senior sergeant school. Can you give me more, because you had talked about your interest in going into auto mechanics. So once you were there and you were doing your training, where did that begin? Where did the auto mechanics then lead you to? You started with an interest in wanting to get into auto mechanics, but then what did that lead you to? Did you stay in auto mechanics once you got into basics? Did they end out starting you there and then you ended up going into something else before actually being sent to Korea?
No, I stayed with the auto mechanics my first tour overseas in Okinawa. Mm-hmm. But when I returned from Okinawa, or as I was returning from Okinawa, in May of 1950, the war broke out in June in Korea. And I was assigned to Fort Hood, Texas. And at that time, they was trying to build up units in the U.S. to send to Korea to support the few ground handling forces they had there. So I immediately was reassigned to Fort Lewis, Washington, to the 2nd Infantry Division, which is what I went with to Korea.
Okay. And there's a long list here of the unit. It says it's actually asking, what about your unit? Just describe to us. You were in the 8th Army
in
unit.
Korea, I was
yes.
a member of the 2nd Infantry Division, was part of the 8th Army Air Corps, or 8th Army, and I was with the 2nd Infantry Division with the 38th Infantry Regiment, Charlie, 1st Battalion, Charlie Company, and I was with the Heavy Weapons Platoon.
Okay.
4th Platoon, and that's when they took my M1 rifle away from me and gave me the carbine.
Right.
And because I had to carry ammo for the 3.5 rocket launcher.
Okay.
We had a gunner, assistant gunner, and 2 ammo bearers for the 3.5 rocket launcher. And I was one of the ammo bearers, which carried 3 rounds of the 3.5 ammunition.
Okay. Excellent. Oh, you got a big job ahead of you. Now, once in combat, what was your job or specialty? Once you were in combat, when you finally went from Okinawa to Korea.
I was a green PFC. I had no idea of what to expect, and I was only in Korea 13 days the first time I got wounded. But anyway, we moved up, went into a holding area, a basic transit area, went on the front line the 3rd day I was in Korea, in the foxhole, and my first night in combat, about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard a machine gun go off. And scared, let me tell you, I was scared to death. I didn't know. Even the buddy in the foxhole I'd only met that evening before, because we were both just thrown in there. Well, the next morning I found out that the units that had been on the front line were pretty well stabilized or built up. And the people that was coming in to support them, they put an extension to the front line, and I was one of these extensions. We just dug a foxhole, and that's all we had. There was no build up to it.
How deep was the foxhole?
Huh?
How deep was that foxhole?
Probably 5 6 foot deep. I could stand in the foxhole and just barely look out over the top.
Did they make you dig it, or did they have it dug before
my
you?
buddy and I dug it. We dug it
Yeah.
by with a little shovel,
Yeah.
spading shovel.
Yes.
And there's a trick to digging a foxhole. You dig a square hole straight down.
Mm-hmm.
Then you dig a bank. It slopes from the back down toward the front.
Mm-hmm.
Then up above the floor, you dig a hole back in the bank that you can sleep in. So if somebody throws a grenade in there, it'll hit on that slope, flow down to the bottom. Then when it goes off, it shoots up past the area where you're sleeping.
Well, that makes sense. Okay.
There's technique to everything. But anyway.
And the ground there in Korea, you know, I've never asked this question, but the ground there in Korea, was it soft? Was it very difficult to dig in? Was it, you know, was there...
The place, we were very fortunate. The place we my first position in the Korea was right up on the bank of a river.
Okay.
The Naktong River, which I can show you on this map. And there was a farmer had a sweet potato bed there. And it was back, maybe 20, 30 feet from the bank of the river. Well, in between the sweet potato bed and the cliff that was there, was where we dug our foxholes. And it was pretty soft, pretty easy going. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I started to say if it's farmland, then you know it's been, you know, churned and tilled up a little bit, and it's pliable and easier to use. Okay. What city or camp did you fight in Korea? Where did you start? I mean, I know that you've gone up and down, you know, Korea several times, it sounds like. But where did you first start? Whenever you
I
first?
was only in Korea 13 days the first time I got wounded.
Okay.
And that was the Pusan perimeter
Okay.
on the Naktong River. I went back to Japan to the hospital. And I was in Japan almost a month. About 26, 27 days.
How were you wounded?
With a hand grenade.
Hand grenade. Okay.
Right side, when we was laying in this sweet potato bed, is laying in a rows, and they threw the hand grenade right in the row with me, and I rolled over and started rolling the second time. I had my right side toward the hand grenade. I was rolling over the furrow in the sweet potato bed, and when the hand grenade went off, it hit me in multiple places up and down the right side. Right shoulder, hip, thigh. Some pieces hit me in the side of the head. In fact, I was bleeding so bad that when the medics come, the doctor, the platoon leader that I was with, squad leader I was with, told him not to even bother to take me off the hill till I wouldn't live to get to the bottom of it.
Oh, wow.
And of course, I was conscious, and I told her, I said, you help me get off this hill, I'll be all right.
Absolutely.
And they did, so we made it.
Okay.
But I went back to Japan to the hospital for a month, and then went back to Korea, and they had advanced across that river and up maybe, I want to say around 100 miles. It was up to Daejeon. Is where they were located when I rejoined them coming back from Japan. And then we walked all the way up that peninsula to the Yula River between North Korea and China.
Oh my goodness. How long was that? How many days? How many, you know, hours? How many miles? I
have no idea. I walked till I was dead on my feet and half asleep half the time. But we made it.
Okay.
And about 2 weeks after we was on the front line was when the Chinese intervened in the combat. Mm-hmm. And of course, all the units started withdrawing. I was with the platoon that was designated as rear guard, and when the units started moving back, they'd leave one rear guard force out of each one. And we had a reinforced platoon that I think about 46, 48 people. and we had 3 days to move back. Also, we was moving back, but we was moving back slower than the main troops that was withdrawing, retrieving. And it took us 3 days and nights to get back to our units. At times we didn't know where we was at. Or out of the 48 people, I think it was 27, 28 that made it back. And I was with a 12-man squad at that time with heavy weapons, and there was only 7 of us made it back.
And was it in the spring? Was it in the winter? Was it
dead of winter in 1950, November 1950? So cold.
Describe what it was like, when you guys were making the movement and you were having to sleep and you were having to trudge forward, you were having to move forward, to get to the Yalu River. Describe what the conditions were like from South Korea through North Korea, especially through the DMZ.
I missed most of that jumping back and forth because I got wounded the second time, the 1st of November, and that is when the Chinese first intervened in the combat. So I got wounded really before we got completely withdrawn back to a stabilized position. Mm-hmm. And I was helicopter lifted back to the North Korean capital, Pyongyang, and flew out to Japan.
Okay.
And that time they flew me to the States. Oh. I was machine gun bullets in the legs.
Okay. And you still have one of the bullets still in your knee, is that correct? I still have a bullet in my left knee.
Okay.
And the shrapnel that's in the shoulder that you currently have, was that from the grenade in the sweet potato patch? Okay.
I've had that shoulder operated on 18 times. Mm. It just keeps getting reinfected.
And you keep saying that the shrapnel will continue to keep...
Hopefully I've got it the last time. I don't know.
Okay. And every time that you came back to Korea, were you rejoined with the same infantry group that you were with before, or were you reassigned to a different, because your men had moved on?
The first time I was wounded,
mm-hmm.
I went back to Korea.
Okay.
The second time I was wounded, I came back to the hospital. I came to the States.
Right,
I didn't go back to Korea.
You didn't? Okay.
Until 10 years later.
Okay.
In the meantime, I got out of the service in 1952, mm-hmm. May 1952. I stayed out until 1960.
Okay. And that's when
during that time, I would join the reserve unit, an artillery reserve unit, and that's when I became an artilleryman. And I got out of the Army as a Staff Sergeant E6 from Korea, and then when I went back in, I had to drop back to a E5. That was under the program of McNamara when we first went back in. And then I retired as a sergeant major. I went up to, that's as high as you can go as an enlisted man.
Okay. What was the camaraderie like with the unit that you were with in Korea?
Really good. Believe me, it was the first insertion, I guess you'd say, of the black people into the troops, into the as a mix into the squads and platoons.
The integration of
integration to the black, and at the same time, we had what they called the senior moment. Anyway, a portion of the Korean Army was designated to join the U.S. forces to bolster their number and count, mm-hmm. and help them support the Korean force altogether.
Okay.
And so we had what they call the Korean soldiers mixed in with us, and we done well. We I have to admit that you grew closer to the people you was right around and knew, because you depended on them,
Right.
and they depended on you,
Right.
and you would have done anything to protect them and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good camaraderie.
That's good. Good. Describe, or what memories do you have of some of your major experiences of battle or events that you can recall? Do you have some memories or experiences of battle that you would like to share?
Yeah, I have a lot of memories from. First of all, when we went to Korea from Washington, we went in a OD uniform, semi-dress uniform, and that was all the clothing we had when we got to Korea. We did not have the foul weather gear for the winter, the parkers, the sleeping bags, the scarves and mittens, the 3-finger mittens and so forth. That the troops that came over later, I'd say later by the January 1951, that was entering the Korean conflict, they came with combat gear. They came with clothing to protect them from the elements.
Right.
We didn't have that.
Why is that?
And as a result of that, a lot of people lost their toes and fingers and ears, and so it just froze.
Right.
I had my feet froze, but in order to, when we was on that withdrawal from retreat, I had to wade a river to get out, and it thawed my feet out.
Wow.
That saved me. So there's a lot of experiences you gain. I can remember being so numb, so cold, that I couldn't hardly reach my weapon to operate my weapon.
Did you find it difficult to be able to fire the weapon? I mean, did you find that the M1 rifles and the pistols and the 45s that you had sometimes locked down on you, or
I never had any bad experiences, because I learned well, I guess, during basic, to take care of your weapon.
Mm-hmm.
If you expect it to take care of you, and I did, and so I didn't have any trouble in that way.
That's good. That's good. And your walks and your time that you spent under those conditions, did you ever witness any people who had frozen to death as a result of the extreme conditions?
No, never.
No. Okay.
Never witnessed anybody that had froze to death, or just a lot of death.
Right.
But mangled, so forth. But after I was back, and I was hospitalized in Brooks Army Medical Center in Texas, they brought in an awful lot of people there that toes, whatever, that had froze in Korea,
Right.
and
Frostbite.
all lost their toes, fingers,
Right.
ears. My ears still peel
Do
from
they?
being so cold.
Wow.
My hands will peel. They're in good shape right now. I'll have to admit that. But thanks to my daughter and my wife, we took good care of them. We kept well on them and whatever. I've got a lot of problem with my feet. I got neuropathy from the feet, from the knees down. It's just numb, and that's from being froze in Korea.
Okay.
I'm not regretting anything. I'm not blaming anybody or laying any. Just as long as they'll take care of me medically, I'll get along.
Okay.
But
In terms of battles, was there any specific campaigns or any specific landings of any kind, or any fighting, specific battles that you were actually involved in? Pork Chop Hill, anything in particular that you were actually involved in?
you talk about it. There's a lot of things that'll bother you that you don't understand. And the first attack that was pulled on our unit in Korea, back down in South Korea, just the north. They blowed whistles, they rung telephones, they rung bells, and it just chilled you. You didn't know what to expect. It was a banzai attack.
Okay.
And yeah, you remember that. You don't forget it. And for years after that, when a telephone rang, I'd jump and almost go to the floor. It bothered me considerably. There was one occasion in North Korea when we went into position. We went into a position relieving another unit so they could withdraw and go back for recreation or rebuild.
Right.
And they had big bonfires spread out across the front line. Nobody worried about anything.
Mm-hmm.
We got in there, and the first thing they do, the commander said, put out them bonfires, and we did that. The second night we was there, we was under attack. So here's this unit had been up there for weeks and hadn't had anything going on. But then when we got out of that, it was something you don't forget very easy. And we suffered a lot of loss. And then there was a couple of other attacks on the way back. We had the 2nd Infantry Division was the largest unit to be surrounded by the Chinese.
Mm-hmm. And this was when, give a month or year of when this was happening.
Yeah, they had surrounded us. We had a roadblock, and I can't remember the mileage, but it seemed to me like it was 16 or 19 miles they had the roadblock.
Okay.
We were fighting our way out of that roadblock. And we'd come to an area where the Chinese would be on the side of the ridges on the side of the road, and they'd fire on the convoys and whatever. We'd have to unload, go fight them, clear the hills, come back, get on the convoy, move a little bit, go fight again. And that was pretty hectic. In fact, that's where I got wounded the second time.
Okay.
That was up by Korea.
Okay.
And that's when I was, the second day of the roadblock, I was flown out to the North Korean capital, which we had under command anyway, after coming up through the peninsula. And that's when I flew out to Japan.
And this was around 51, is that correct? Did you say that you said that was around 51? What month and year was this that you were talking about?
November 1950.
Okay, November 1950. Okay, all right. When you were on the front line, what duties were you actually assigned to?
Just the front line defense, so the foxholes are right up on the front line.
Right.
First line of defense.
The newly added ones, right? The newly added ones.
Yeah, newly added ones.
So,
first line of defense.
And when you saw combat, Homer, how did you feel when witnessing casualties and destruction? What was your reactions when you first saw it, and then as time went on? And like I said, the destruction that was done by war itself.
Well, after the first 2-3 attacks, I'll put it that way. I can't say battles because it might be on one unit, it might be on a whole front line. Mm-hmm. And if it was full front line, it'd be a battle. But about the second time they attacked our unit, then you kind of got an idea of what to expect and how to defend yourself, what to do and to take cover and so forth.
So you found that every time that you guys were attacked, that it would be pretty regular. They wouldn't retreat and then figure out different ways to be able to approach this? You kind of felt that it would be the same way every time?
You know, there's just a little bit of difference about every attack you go into. You might have the left flank attacking and you laying down a field of fire. You might have the right field side attacking. If you're in the heavy weapons like I was, you go up on a point and you lay down a field of fire with heavy weapons and let the rifleman make the attack. So, yeah, everything you do has a purpose, serves a purpose, and you try to hit the enemy on the weakest points first, draw their attention to the weakest points so that you can attack the heavy defense. So you got to prepare according to the conditions at the time.
Right.
You just don't. Everyone's got some resemblance, but there's all of them got a little bit different.
Right.
Each one's got a little bit of difference in it.
And you guys, you were talking about, referring back to, you said, that you guys were getting used to, you guys were getting used to the approach, you guys were getting used to, the style of attacks and so forth. So to continue on with your other story, you were talking about, y'all's position, because we were on the topic about witnessing casualties and destruction. You were talking about the number of, times that you guys would see them, you guys were getting used to the style of attacks. What you wanted to continue talking about that?
Well, I mentioned earlier that the first time I got wounded, or the first time I was in combat, the first night in combat, the machine gun opened up to our right flank, my right flank. That scared me something terrible because I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
Well, I found out later that the people that was up on my right had been there a while. They had put up an apron fence out for their positions. That's just a straight fence with a barbed wire apron on each side, and they'd hung cans and whatever in there with rocks in them and everything that would rattle. So that if anybody tried to breach that fence or cross over it, they would shake it, it would rattle.
Oh, okay.
And if you're sitting up here with a machine gun, you've already got your limits spotted on the ground. All you got to do is just rake the fence with a machine gun and take care of whoever's. And that's what had happened. Because the next morning after that had happened, they found two guys on the fence.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that teaches you something.
Absolutely.
That's a method of defense, first of all. Put that fence out there, barbed wire fence, which was available to us. And you also learned at that position and later on to improve my foxhole there, we had a village that was abandoned down below the hill where we was on. And we had went down there and ripped the door off one of those Korean houses, hooches. It was a straw house with a wooden door, and the wooden door was pretty heavy, pretty thick. We took that back and made it cover over the top of our foxhole.
That's clever.
It would take a direct hit coming down like a 60 millimeter mortar or 81 millimeter mortar and protect what's below it, and that was me.
All right.
So
that's pretty sharp.
We did that. See, that's just something you learn to build up your defense in any way you can. You sandbag the front berm of your foxhole. If that, you learn also you don't throw any fresh dirt out in front of your foxhole.
Why is that?
Because that tells the enemy, hey, there's activity there.
Oh, okay.
If the dirt is sun-baked, dried out, and not been changed, they don't bother to pay any attention to it. But there's a lot of things you can. If you're going to put brush up in front of your foxhole, you got to change it every day, because if it dries out and turns brown, they know that's not live brush sticking up there.
Oh.
And they, so you learn a lot of things.
Some simple tactics that are highly effective.
A tactic, this is not in Korea, but a tactic we learned in Vietnam, being in the artillery. You done everything in the world to protect your artillery rounds, because if the enemy got them, they would take the fuse off, put a controlled detonator in them, hang them up in the trees above the road, and command detonate them when you're going under. They got a lot of Americans killed that way. But that was a technique that the enemy used to harass and interdict fire.
What kind of techniques did the Chinese actually do to you all to distract you, to fight against you? Was there anything in particular that the Chinese used? Sounds like you had some run-ins with the Chinese.
I really can't talk at that very much because, like I said, the Chinese entered the war in October, and the 1st of November I was hit. So.
Okay. Yeah.
But at that time, or by that time, we had probably 14, 16 inches of snow on the ground. Mm-hmm. Temperatures down below zero all the time, extremely cold. And the Chinese come in there with heavy batten type uniforms on it, coats and trousers. The sides of your coat would be that thick, cotton batten, or wool, dogskin, and hoods, the dog lined with dogskin. They protected themselves, but they knew the climate better than we did.
Right.
So, and they had this stuff available to them.
Okay.
So that's something you learn from the enemy too.
Right. Absolutely. Did you receive any medals or honors for your service? Did you receive any medals or honors for your service in Korea?
Yes, I received, first I was President of the Unit Citation of Korea. I received a Bronze Star for the activity on the up on the North Korea activity withdrawal. I received Armed Forces Expeditionary Ribbon, and I know something else. I had 6, 7 ribbons when I came out of Korea.
Okay. And were you a POW?
I'm sorry?
Were you a POW, a prisoner of war?
No, I was never a prisoner of war. We was very scared one time, one of the nights when we was left back out there by ourselves, shared very few people, and it turned out that we had crossed from one side of a road to the other, and we got up on the point of a hill ridge when a Chinese convoy went down behind us. Of course, we didn't interfere with it, and they went on by, and they bypassed us. Mm-hmm. But that's about the closest I come to being a prisoner.
Right. Oof. And you've mentioned several times that you were wounded. Was there any other wounds that you received that we haven't mentioned in the video?
Only the hands froze, my ears froze, my feet froze as a result of the weather, the elements. But as far as wounded combat injuries, no.
Okay. Now, when you were returning from the war, when and where were you when the war ended? You talked about being, being injured and coming back. Well, where were you when the war ended?
When I came back from Korea, of course, I was in a hospital down at Brooks, downtown for I'd have to look at the records, but I think about 2 months.
Okay.
And upon being released from the hospital, I was assigned to Camp Roberts, California, which had just opened up after World War II to teach basic training to the trainees going over to Korea.
Okay.
So I had combat experience, and I was still got in the middle of the instructor.
Oh, I bet they did. You were up front and
As a
center.
PFC, or well, I made corporal right after I got there. But I was a PFC when I got to Camp Roberts, California. 2 months later, I was a corporal and assistant platoon sergeant.
Okay.
And about 2 months after that, I was a platoon sergeant. In fact, I was promoted. I went from a PFC to a staff sergeant E6 in less than a year.
Whew.
All in Korea, all in California.
Wow, that's impressive.
So,
And how were you received by your family and community? And how were you received by your community and your family and by other veterans when you returned?
when we got discharged from, I was discharged from Camp Cook, California. And when we were discharged, they told us to change into civilian clothes and not travel in military uniform. That a lot of people disrespected the Korean service. I never really confronted only on a couple of occasions. I came home, I was staying with my sister and brother-in-law, and he took me to the VFW hall, see about joining the VFW.
Right.
And I walked in there, everybody in there was World War II veterans that run the hall. And I told them, I said, I'd just been discharged from the service, I'd just come back from Korea. I'd like to join the VFW. And the guy in the middle, there was three guys sitting behind the table, the guy in the middle said, "Get out of here, kid, you ain't been in no war." And I looked at them, none of them, they had VFW uniforms on. Ain't none of them had near the ribbons I had. And I turned around and walked out. I've never been back in a VFW.
I completely understand.
Just flat because of the way I was treated. My family supported me all the way. Members of the community in my hometown, I'd go in there and everybody greeted me and treated me with respect. In the town where my sister and brother-in-law were living, you meet somebody, you found out you were with the service, they treated you with respect. I didn't have a job or anything, of course, and my brother-in-law talked to the county commissioner, and he gave me a job on they had improving roads, ditches, bar ditches and so forth along country roads, and a lot of them had sprouts, tree sprouts, or whatever, growed up in the ditch. Mm-hmm. They had to hire people to go out there and grub them out and cut them out, whatever. And he hired me for about 2.5 weeks, which gave me a start, gave me a little bit of cash. And then I went to work for, the city was laying a pipeline from the water station, which was about 12 miles from the town. And they had contracted a contractor out of Arkansas to lay that water line. And I got a job on laying the water line, pipeline. And the first job, I guess, I ever quit. After one weekend, we'd been out there working about 4 or 5 weeks, and the boss, of course, was from Arkansas, and he went home one weekend, and he come back Monday morning about half drunk and just raising heck with everybody. And I told 2 or 3 guys where I was snaking on the pipeline, which was a job nobody wanted because it was dirty and nasty. Mm-hmm. And I was taking it because it paid more money.
Right.
But anyway, I told him, I said, he don't come down here and talk to me like that. I said, nobody cusses me. I don't cuss anybody, nobody cusses me. And so he did. He come on down the line and he was talking to a couple of guys up on the ditch that was covering up the pipeline after we'd snaked it. And he come on over where me and a couple other guys was at, and I told him, I said, and I can't think of his name, but I think it was Burns. And I told him, Mr. Burns, ain't no need cussing me out. I ain't done nothing to cause you any harm or to give you any reason to do that. I don't want it. Mm-hmm. Well, who the hell do they kill? Or some prima donna? Just started off, I just laid down my dish. I said, okay, next vehicle going to town, I'll go home. Mm-hmm. Oh, who the hell? He just raising heck with me.
Right.
And I told him, I said, I don't want to hear it. Yeah. I said, you make out my time. Next vehicle goes to town, I'll go on it.
Yeah.
So I quit.
Have you remained in contact or reunited with any of your fellow veterans? Any of the men that were actually in your unit?
Made contact with a lot of Korean veterans. Mm-hmm. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, everything you can think of with the Korean War Veterans Association. Mm-hmm. I've got a book from the 2nd Infantry Division listing everybody that was killed in Korea and everybody that's alive. And listed by unit and everything. Mm-hmm. Nobody in the book from my unit.
Why is that?
Nobody in there listed from.
Why is that? Why are they not listed? Right. Well, but I'm just saying, but he says alive or dead, so that's why I asked if he, there was.
Even the 2nd Infantry Division's records, when the Chinese intervened in the war, mm-hmm. and the 2nd Infantry Division started withdrawing, organized withdrawal, I seen them burn road graders, brand new ones, had never stuck a blade in the ground. Mm-hmm. They just shot tires, set them on fire, burn right where they sit. All kinds of vehicles, defense equipment, burnt because they couldn't bring it back out with them as fast as they had to move.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So they had to withdraw. Well, in the process, they also burnt all the personnel records.
Okay.
There was no record of anybody in the division left.
So that explains it. Okay.
But anyway, there was things that went on during that withdrawal and during that retreat back from North Korea till they could get their forces realigned and ready to hold position. You've seen a lot of things that you wish you hadn't seen or never want to remember. And
well, since you actually have, did you receive actually any GI Bill benefits? If so, how did that impact your life? Whenever you returned back, I know that there was the Korean benefits, and I know that GI was mostly World War II, but they still had benefits being offered to Korean War veterans when they returned. Did you use the benefits?
I had all kinds of opportunity to use the GI Bill. Mm-hmm. And the only time I ever even approached the VA or anything, I was living in Wichita, Kansas. And I come down with, this is right after I got back from Korea, mm-hmm. got out of that service, I come down with trench mouth.
Okay. Which
was the result of the bad water.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And I went to the VA hospital in Wichita, Kansas, and they took care of me.
Okay.
Treated me. Other than that, I've never requested or received any benefits other than when I bought a home in northeastern Oklahoma, the first home we bought. I bought that on GI Bill.
Okay.
Or VA loan, I guess you'd say.
Okay.
Anyway, other than that, that's it. Now, when I got down here, since I've been down here, I've got a lot of benefits from the VA. In fact, I volunteered down to VA every Thursday, or did up until the last year and a half that I've been so ill. I volunteered every Thursday or once a week down at the VA, starting out repairing wheelchairs, and then they had volunteers up on the front desk that sold hats and military memorabilia, and that was under the volunteer services. So they put me up there on that. One of the boys one of the men passed away. And after a while, they organized ambassador to the VA. So they made me an ambassador and gave me a vest. I've got the vest in there, and put me up on the front door, reading people coming in, helping them find their clinics that they were going to, where they were located, and so forth.
Okay.
And I worked that for about 3-4 years. And they done away with the ambassador program per se, and I went back to selling caps again. So I sold caps the last 5-6 years. But I have not worked at the VA in the last 7-8 months. I just don't feel like getting up that early. I'd have to catch a bus at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
or before 6 anyway, to get down there and have my material I was going to sell out, set up, ready to sell by 8 o'clock. And it's extremely difficult for me to get up that early and get around.
I completely
I just can't
understand.
do it.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
I'm 100% behind the military. Once a soldier, always a soldier. That's me. I would encourage any young person in school today, high school, that can foresee no possibility whatsoever of gaining college, to join the military. Let the military pay for their college. They not only that, they can grow up so much quicker, stronger from the military activity. They learn to get along with people from every part of the country, even foreign countries. We would refer to as foreign countries, American properties and so forth, territories. I can remember I was served with a sergeant that was from Goan. A wonderful man, wonderful man. I was in Holland, Dutch. I was the first sergeant of a warhead detachment. I had a clerk that was Puerto Rican. I had 2-3 other Spanish descent personnel in the detachment, all of them good soldiers. I had no complaint. At Fort Sill, I had 86 military personnel. I was Sergeant Major of War Schools Detachment. I had 86 military personnel, and I had about 160 civilians. Now, many of the civilians were retired military also. All the way up to colonels, 06s. And I had a beautiful unit up there. I had no problems whatsoever in that unit. The school brigade, and I was a school of the detachment that made all the manuals for the artillery. Shipped them all over the world to the different artillery units. And NCO academies and everything that taught artillery in different places. And I had to visit. I was on a inspection team that traveled from Fort Sill to all the different military installations in the U.S., Germany, Holland, I think it's pretty well and inspect the academies that was teaching artillery, because we made the manual, we specified what was to being taught, and we went there to see if they were following up on it. So that was after I was the commander of the NCOES battery, and that's where I was discharged from.
Okay.
In February the 2nd, 1982.
1982. Ooh, that's a long time for you to have been in the service. Well, to conclude our interview, Homer, is there anything that you feel that we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview? Is there anything that you would like to share?
There's a lot of things that's difficult, I'll put it that way. One of the most difficult things for me was riding that ship from Fort Lewis, Washington to Korea. I mean, we hit rough waters, blown off course 400 miles from, we were to go into Tokyo, Japan. We hit a hurricane. It blew us off about 400 miles. We landed up just north of Okinawa and then cut back up to Korea. And that, when you're ordered below deck in one of them troop ships, it is not a pleasant thing to happen. Everybody getting sick on the stairwells. It was rough.
Oh, wow.
Weather in Korea is something that the government could have better prepared us for. They did not. Realizing, of course, that there was a rush, get people to fill up your divisions, get them to Korea as soon as possible, get them online.
Right.
Set up a line of defense so that they need some relief in Korea. When you take an island as big as that is, or a peninsula, and then only 26 miles of it left, all the Korean people in that little 26 miles on a couple of small islands, it's not a pleasant thing to see. And majority of them are refugees from the villages, of course, that had no clothing or not enough clothing for themselves or for their children, no fuel to keep warm with. It's really hard to understand how a country that big could get in such a predicament in such a short time.
Yeah.
But North Korea just overpowered them and come all the way down and was ready to push them right out in the water. That was their aim, just to annihilate them.
Right.
And today, Korea is one of the most thriving metropolis there is anywhere. It is beautiful over there.
Well,
I went back to Korea 3 times after the war.
oh, okay.
In 60, 70, 50, 60, and 70. No, I was in Korea 3 times. That's what it was. I was in Korea in 1950 during the war. I was in Korea in 1960. during the rebuild configuration of the Korea. The Japanese ruled Korea for many years, and they had just trimmed every bit of the forestry and woodlands off of Korea, and they had to start all over. In 1960, they formed a Arbor Day, where I think it's what they call it. Anyway, every village had to plant a tree for every member of the village, whether it's an infant or I don't know.
Everybody, right.
And it covered the hills. And in 1970, when I went back, some beautiful trees, this big around, 10 years old, it just altogether a transfiguration. You've never seen it. A country look like that. In 1960, the U.S. went in there and started quarrying rock and what have you out of the hills, and the Korean bring it in with dump trucks and dump it, and the Korean women would pick that up in baskets on their head, and they built a road bed. The U.S. government helped. In 1970, when I was there, all them rock were covered with asphalt. You got a highway, super highway, up through Korea, built by the Korean community and the U.S. support.
Right.
And it has done wonders.
That's
beautiful.
fantastic.
There was only one or two, maybe three high-rise buildings you'd call high-rise. I'm saying 8, 10 stories maybe. In Seoul, Korea, when I was there, went up through there in 1950. In 1970, they've got 30, 40-story high-rises all over the place, many of them. So you can see a difference in the country, and you just have to thank God of what happened there. And I thank God that I was able to be a part of it. All the different, and I don't have them out here, I've got all kinds of medallions and what have you that the Korean government has given the Korean veterans. Every year they give us something, a luncheon and what have you.
Right.
And I'm just real proud to have been a part of it.
That's great.
And I think that's about all I've got to say.
All right. Well, this concludes our interview with Homer Mundy. And Homer, we want to thank you for everything that you've done and for your service, sir. And this will conclude our interview with Don Blake and Homer Mundy.